Vanessa Thompson had never known what it meant to hear the word no. Growing up in a mansion overlooking the city's most expensive neighborhood, her world was built on a foundation of luxury and privilege that most people couldn't even imagine. At 24 years old, she stood at 5'6" with perfectly maintained blonde hair that cost more than a month's rent for the average person. Her father, Robert Thompson, had built his fortune in real estate, turning a small inheritance into a billion-dollar empire that stretched across 3 states. His name appeared on buildings, charity event programs, and occasionally political donation lists. "Daddy will handle it" became Vanessa's life motto from an early age. When she crashed her first car at 16, a brand new sports car that most adults would need years to afford, her father simply called his assistant and had another one delivered the next day. No lectures, no consequences. Her typical Tuesday looked nothing like most people's. She would wake up around 11 after her personal assistant had already set out her outfit for the day. Breakfast was prepared by the family chef, who knew exactly how she liked her avocado toast and smoothie. By afternoon, she'd be shopping at stores where prices weren't displayed on items because, as her mother often said, if you have to ask, you can't afford it. Her social media pages were filled with photos from exotic beaches, exclusive nightclubs, and private jets. Each post collected thousands of likes from followers who dreamed of living her seemingly perfect life. What they didn't see was how empty those moments sometimes felt. How Vanessa would occasionally stare at her phone, surrounded by so-called friends who were more interested in her last name than in her as a person. Last month, while driving her luxury convertible down a busy street, Vanessa had been filming a video for her social media while going 30 miles over the speed limit. She barely noticed the police lights in her mirror at first, too busy choosing the right filter for her video. When the officer approached her window, she didn't even look up from her phone. "License and registration," the officer had said, clearly unimpressed with her dismissive attitude. "Do you know who my father is?" Vanessa had replied with a laugh, finally glancing up at the police officer. This is such a waste of everyone's time. The ticket she received was for reckless driving, speeding, and using a mobile device while operating a vehicle. 3 violations that could have resulted in serious consequences for most people. That evening, she tossed the ticket onto the marble kitchen counter where her father was reviewing some documents. "Daddy, can you take care of this stupid thing? The officer was totally targeting me because of my car." Robert Thompson had barely looked at the ticket before nodding. "I'll have my assistant call the court administrator tomorrow. Don't worry about it." Life continued as normal for Vanessa. More shopping, more parties, more posts about her amazing life. When the court date arrived on her calendar, she initially thought about not showing up at all. Her father's connections had always fixed things before. But this time, her father's assistant informed her that she needed to appear in person. "The judge is insisting," the assistant explained. "But Mr. Thompson says just to be polite and it will all be handled." With a dramatic sigh, Vanessa agreed to go. After all, how bad could it be? It would make for an interesting story to tell at brunch later, her brief encounter with the regular people at the courthouse. She had no idea that this routine court appearance would become the turning point that would change everything about her carefully constructed world. The municipal courthouse stood like a gray stone island in a sea of modern buildings. Vanessa arrived 30 minutes late, having spent extra time deciding what to wear for what she called her slumming it adventure. She finally chose a white designer dress and red-bottomed shoes that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The courthouse security line shocked her. No one had ever made her wait in line before. When the security guard asked her to place her purse on the conveyor belt for scanning, she rolled her eyes dramatically. "Do you have any idea how much this bag costs?" she asked, holding her limited edition handbag away from the plastic tray as if it might catch something. "I'm just here for like 5 minutes." The guard, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes who had seen it all before, simply pointed at the tray again without saying a word. Behind Vanessa, other people waiting in line shifted their weight impatiently. Inside courtroom 3B, Vanessa found another surprise, nowhere comfortable to sit. The wooden benches were hard and worn smooth by thousands of people who had sat there before her. The room smelled like cleaning solution and too many bodies in too small a space. She wrinkled her nose and found a spot at the end of a bench, making sure to leave enough room so nobody would sit too close. All around her were people from every walk of life. An elderly man in carefully pressed but clearly old clothes, a young mother trying to keep her toddler quiet, a college student nervously flipping through papers, and various others waiting for their turn before the judge. Vanessa didn't notice any of them. Instead, she pulled out her phone and began scrolling through her social media accounts. "Can you believe I have to be here with these people?" she texted to her friend, snapping a discreet photo of the courtroom. "Daddy couldn't get me out of it. So unfair." When the court clerk announced that phones needed to be turned off, Vanessa pretended not to hear. She was in the middle of posting about her courtroom adventure to her followers when a voice called the room to order. "All rise." The Honorable Judge Michael Washington presiding. Everyone in the courtroom stood up except Vanessa, who continued tapping away at her phone. A court officer approached her. "Ma'am, you need to stand for the judge," he said quietly. Vanessa glanced up, annoyed at the interruption. "I'm kind of in the middle of something important," she said, her fingers still moving across the screen. The officer stood firmly beside her. "Ma'am, please stand now or I'll need to confiscate your phone." With an exaggerated sigh that was meant to be heard by everyone, Vanessa reluctantly stood, still clutching her phone. Judge Washington entered the courtroom, a dignified man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and eyes that had seen decades of human drama unfold before him. His robe hung perfectly pressed on his tall frame as he took his seat at the bench. From his elevated position, he could see everything in the courtroom, including Vanessa, who had immediately sat back down and returned to her phone the moment he took his seat. The first hour of court proceedings passed with Vanessa barely paying attention. She texted friends, checked her shopping apps, and occasionally took selfies with exaggerated bored expressions. Each time the court officer glanced her way, she would temporarily lower her phone, only to raise it again when he looked elsewhere. Docket number 47,921, Vanessa Thompson, reckless driving and use of electronic device while operating a motor vehicle, the clerk finally called. Vanessa didn't move at first, not registering that her case had been called. "Vanessa Thompson," the clerk repeated, louder this time. Someone nearby nudged her. "I think that's you," a woman whispered. Vanessa stood, smoothing her dress and flipping her hair over her shoulder. As she walked toward the front of the courtroom, she continued texting, finishing her message about how boring the whole experience was. What she didn't realize as she approached the bench, still looking down at her screen, was that Judge Washington was watching her with an expression that had made hardened criminals nervous. The courtroom suddenly felt very quiet, like the moment before a storm breaks. Vanessa approached the bench with small steps, her designer heels clicking loudly on the floor. The sound echoed through the now silent courtroom. Her thumbs still moved across her phone screen as she walked. "Ms. Thompson," Judge Washington said, his deep voice filling the room, "please put your phone away while addressing this court." Vanessa glanced up briefly, then back down at her phone. "Just a sec," she said, finishing her text with a little smile. "This is kind of important." Several people in the courtroom exchanged looks of disbelief. The court clerk's eyebrows shot up, and the bailiff took a half-step forward. Judge Washington paused, giving her a moment to realize her mistake. When she didn't, he spoke again, his voice firm but controlled. "Ms. Thompson, in this courtroom, nothing is more important than respecting the legal process. Please put your phone away immediately." With a dramatic sigh, Vanessa dropped her phone into her purse. "Fine," she said, drawing out the word. She flipped her hair over her shoulder and looked around the courtroom as if expecting an audience to appreciate her performance. "You are charged with reckless driving and using an electronic device while operating a motor vehicle," Judge Washington continued. "How do you plead?" Vanessa shrugged. "I guess not guilty. Whatever. Can we hurry this up? I have a lunch reservation at 1. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Judge Washington tapped his gavel once, and silence fell again. "Miss Thompson, this is a serious matter. Your driving endangered lives. Do you understand the charges against you?" "Look," Vanessa said, leaning one hand on the table in front of her, "everybody drives like that. I don't see why I'm being singled out. My dad says it's probably because of my car." Judge Washington leaned forward slightly. The law applies equally to everyone, regardless of what kind of car they drive. The officer's report states you were going 30 miles over the speed limit while recording a video. Yeah, but nobody got hurt, Vanessa said with another shrug. Honestly, I don't think this is worth everyone's time. Can't I just pay a fine or something? My dad said to tell you he'd take care of it. The judge's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Justice isn't something to be taken care of, Ms. Thompson. It's a process that applies to everyone equally. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Come on, we all know that's not how the world really works. The courtroom grew even quieter, if that was possible. Even the usual shuffling of papers stopped. Would you care to explain what you mean by that? Judge Washington asked, his voice dangerously calm. I mean, Vanessa said, gesturing vaguely around the room, let's be real. My dad knows the mayor. He's donated to every campaign in this city. We have a building named after us downtown. She reached for her phone again, seemingly unable to help herself. No offense, but I really don't think I'm supposed to be here right now. Judge Washington watched as she began scrolling through her phone again. Ms. Thompson, I'm going to ask you one more time to put that phone away and show this court the respect it deserves. Without looking up, Vanessa waved her hand dismissively. Yeah, 1 minute. This is actually about a charity thing, so it's important. More important than your legal situation, the judge asked. Well, yeah, this will all work out. It always does. She looked up briefly and added with a patronizing tone, no offense, but you probably don't understand how things work at my level. My dad will make a call, and this whole thing will disappear. Then she did something that caused audible gasps in the courtroom. She turned her back partially to the judge to take a selfie, making a mock-set face with the courthouse seal visible behind her. For my story, she explained to no one in particular. My followers are going to love this. Judge Washington sat perfectly still. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the silent room. Miss Thompson, you are now in contempt of this court. A hush fell over the courtroom. Vanessa's smile froze on her face as she slowly turned back to face Judge Washington. What? She asked, genuinely confused. In her world, people didn't talk to her this way. You are in contempt of court, Judge Washington repeated. This means you have shown disrespect to the court's authority. It is a serious matter. Vanessa laughed nervously, looking around as if waiting for others to join in. No one did. Oh, come on, I was just kidding around, she said, tucking her phone into her purse at last. Let's start over. I didn't mean anything by it. Judge Washington studied her for a moment. Miss Thompson, I'm going to give you one opportunity to apologize to this court for your behavior. I suggest you take it seriously. Vanessa's expression changed from confusion to annoyance. She wasn't used to being spoken to this way. Her parents had always taught her that people like them didn't need to apologize. Fine, I'm sorry, she said quickly, with no real feeling behind the words. Now can we move on? Like I said, I have plans. The judge shook his head slightly. That doesn't sound like a sincere apology to me. Perhaps you don't understand the seriousness of your situation. Contempt of court can result in fines or even jail time. At the word jail, Vanessa's eyes widened. For the first time, a flicker of worry crossed her face. Jail? For using my phone? That's crazy. Her voice rose. Do you know who my father is? It doesn't matter who your father is, Miss Thompson. In this courtroom, everyone is equal under the law. Vanessa's face flushed red. She wasn't used to feeling embarrassed or uncertain. These were new feelings, and she didn't like them one bit. This is ridiculous. My father plays golf with the governor. He'll have your job for this. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. The spectators in the courtroom shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The bailiff took another step forward. The court reporter's fingers paused over her machine. Judge Washington remained perfectly calm. Ms. Thompson, threatening a judge is another serious offense. I'm going to give you one more chance to compose yourself and show proper respect for these proceedings. Something in his steady gaze made Vanessa pause. For a brief moment, doubt crept in. Maybe she had gone too far. But admitting that would mean admitting she was wrong, something she had almost no experience with. I wasn't threatening you, she said, her voice slightly less confident now. I'm just saying this is all a big misunderstanding. Is it a misunderstanding that you were driving dangerously while filming yourself? Judge Washington asked. Everyone does it, Vanessa insisted. My followers expect regular updates. Your followers, the judge said slowly, would be very disappointed if you caused an accident that hurt someone, wouldn't they? I'm a good driver, Vanessa said defensively. The law says otherwise, Ms. Thompson. The law says using a phone while driving is dangerous and illegal. Vanessa felt trapped. She wasn't used to conversations she couldn't control or charm her way out of. Look, she said, leaning forward and lowering her voice as if sharing a secret, we both know how this works. People like me don't go to jail. My dad will make a donation to the courthouse or whatever, and we can all move on with our day. That's just how the world works for people in my position. She gestured vaguely toward the judge. No offense, but someone from your background might not understand how these things usually go. The implication hung in the air. Several people in the gallery audibly caught their breath. The court clerk's head snapped up from her paperwork, eyes wide with shock. Judge Washington's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes hardened. He sat very still for a long moment, simply looking at Vanessa. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but carried to every corner of the silent room. Ms. Thompson, I understand precisely how the world works, perhaps better than you do. And it seems to me that it's time you learned about a different part of that world, the part where actions have consequences, regardless of who your father is. Judge Washington folded his hands on the bench. For nearly 30 seconds, he said nothing, simply studying Vanessa as she shifted uncomfortably from one designer heel to the other. The courtroom remained so quiet you could hear the wall clock ticking. Finally, he spoke. Ms. Thompson, are you familiar with the concept of community service? Vanessa blinked, thrown off by the question. Yeah. That's like when celebrities plant trees for publicity, right? Someone in the back of the courtroom stifled a laugh. Judge Washington didn't smile. Not exactly, he said. Community service is work performed without pay to benefit the public. It's often assigned as an alternative to jail time for certain offenses. Vanessa's perfectly shaped eyebrows shot up. Wait, you're not seriously giving me community service, are you? I have a full schedule. I'm supposed to be in the Hamptons next weekend. Judge Washington picked up a pen and made a note on the paper in front of him. Ms. Thompson, I've been on this bench for 17 years. In that time, I've seen thousands of people come through my courtroom. Most of them don't arrive in designer clothes or have fathers who play golf with the governor. He put down his pen and leaned forward slightly. Most of them are good people who make mistakes and are willing to accept the consequences. What troubles me about you is not just your dangerous driving, but your belief that consequences are for other people. Vanessa swallowed hard. For the first time that day, she didn't have a quick response. Your actions show a profound disconnect from the community you live in, the judge continued. You seem to believe that your wealth places you above the law and above your fellow citizens. He picked up a file and flipped through it. I see that this isn't your first traffic violation. You have 3 prior speeding tickets that were mysteriously reduced to parking violations. Vanessa's cheeks flushed. Her father's assistant had handled those, making them go away as promised. Your record, Judge Washington said, and your behavior in my courtroom today, tell me that fines mean nothing to you. Your father's money has insulated you from learning the lessons that help us become responsible adults. He closed the file with a decisive movement. What you need, Miss Thompson, is to see the world beyond your privileged bubble. The judge sat up straighter. For the charges of reckless driving and using an electronic device while operating a vehicle, I sentence you to the maximum fine allowed by law. Vanessa relaxed slightly. A fine was nothing. Her father wouldn't even notice it. Additionally, Judge Washington continued, for contempt of court, I am sentencing you to 90 days of community service at the Hope Harbor Homeless Shelter. Vanessa's mouth fell open. 90 days? At a homeless shelter? You can't be serious. I assure you, I am entirely serious, the judge replied. You will work there 3 days per week, helping to prepare and serve meals, clean facilities, and assist the staff with daily operations. Vanessa looked around desperately, as if seeking help from the very people who had watched her disrespect the court. This is crazy. I don't know how to do any of that stuff. Then this will be educational for you, Judge Washington said calmly. But there's more. More? Vanessa felt lightheaded. You will keep a daily journal of your experiences, reflecting on what you learn from the people you meet. Each Friday, you will submit this journal to my office for review. If I find your entries superficial or disrespectful, I will extend your service. Whispers rippled through the courtroom. This was an unusual sentence, even for Judge Washington, who was known for his creative approach to justice. Additionally, you will attend a weekly cultural sensitivity workshop at the community center. Your attendance and participation will be monitored and reported to this court. Vanessa's knees felt weak. This couldn't be happening to her. The Hope Harbor homeless shelter stood in a part of town Vanessa had never visited before. The 3-story brick building was clean but worn, with a small sign above the entrance and a fenced playground to one side. As her driver pulled up at 6:58 the next morning, Vanessa stared out the window in disbelief. "Are you sure this is the right place?" she asked her driver, hoping there had been some mistake. "Yes, Miss Thompson, this is the address in the court order," he answered, his voice carefully neutral. Vanessa checked her reflection in her compact mirror, adjusting her hair. She had dressed down for the occasion, designer jeans that were pre-distressed to look worn and a cashmere sweater that cost more than most people's monthly rent. To her, this was slumming it. "Wait here," she told her driver. "I'll try to get this sorted out quickly." The shelter's front desk was staffed by a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair pulled back in a practical bun. Reading glasses hung from a chain around her neck, and she wore a simple cardigan with the shelter's logo stitched on the pocket. "You must be Mrs. Chen," Vanessa said, forcing a smile. "There's been a huge misunderstanding. I'm Vanessa Thompson, and—" "I know who you are," Mrs. Chen interrupted calmly. "Judge Washington called me personally about your service here. We've been expecting you." She reached under the desk and pulled out a plastic bin. "Your phone and any other electronics go in here during your shift." Vanessa clutched her phone tighter. There must be some kind of exception. "I have important calls." "No exceptions," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "Judge's orders. You can check your messages during your lunch break." Reluctantly, Vanessa placed her phone in the bin. It felt like losing a limb. "Now," Mrs. Chen continued, handing her a blue apron with the shelter's logo, "today you'll be helping in the kitchen. We serve breakfast at 7:30, so we need to hurry." The kitchen was hot, noisy, and overwhelming. Huge pots bubbled on industrial stoves. A tall man with forearms covered in colorful tattoos was chopping vegetables at incredible speed. "This is Tom," Mrs. Chen said. "He runs our kitchen. You'll be working under his direction." Tom barely looked up from his chopping. "Ever worked in a kitchen before?" "No," Vanessa admitted. "Ever cooked anything?" Vanessa thought about the handful of times she'd made instant ramen in her college dorm. "Not really." Tom sighed. "Start by washing your hands. Then you can help Rose with the eggs." Rose turned out to be a woman about Vanessa's age, with tired eyes and a worn face that made her look older. As Vanessa approached, she noticed Rose's hands were red and chapped from work. "I've never made eggs for this many people," Vanessa confessed. "Just keep stirring so they don't burn," Rose instructed. "I've been cooking here for 8 months, ever since me and my kids moved into the shelter. You get used to it." "You live here?" Vanessa asked, genuinely surprised. "3rd floor, room 12. Me and my 2 kids. Been waiting on affordable housing for almost a year now." Vanessa didn't know what to say. The concept of not being able to afford housing was completely foreign to her. The morning passed in a blur of cracking eggs, carrying heavy trays, and serving food to a line of people that seemed endless. By 10 a.m., Vanessa's back ached, her feet throbbed in her unsuitable shoes, and her perfectly manicured nails had chipped. "When's our break?" she asked Tom, wiping sweat from her forehead. He looked at her like she'd grown a second head. "Break? We clean up from breakfast, then start prepping for lunch. Welcome to food service." By lunchtime, Vanessa was stationed behind the serving counter, dishing out mashed potatoes to a line of shelter residents. Her arm ached from the repetitive motion. She barely looked up at the faces passing by. "Could I get a little extra?" asked a quiet voice. Vanessa glanced up to see a girl about 12 years old, her clothes clean but clearly hand-me-downs. "We're supposed to stick to 1 scoop per person," Vanessa said, repeating what Tom had told her. "I know," the girl whispered. "But my little brother doesn't like the meat. He'll only eat the potatoes." Vanessa hesitated, then gave her a slightly larger scoop. The girl's face lit up with a smile that transformed her whole appearance. "Thank you," she said with genuine gratitude. That simple thank you for something as small as extra mashed potatoes hit Vanessa in an unexpected way. When was the last time she had truly thanked someone for anything? By the end of her first day, Vanessa collapsed into the back seat of her waiting car, too exhausted to even check the hundreds of notifications on her phone. Every muscle in her body ached. Her hair smelled like kitchen grease. Her designer jeans had a stain she wasn't sure would come out. "How was your day, Miss Thompson?" her driver asked politely. Vanessa stayed out the window as they pulled away from the shelter, watching as Rose and her 2 children played on the small playground. It was, she began, but couldn't find the right words. Awful? Eye-opening? Confusing? For once in her life, Vanessa Thompson was speechless. 2 months into her community service, Vanessa sat cross-legged on a colorful rug in the shelter's children's corner, reading a picture book to 5 young kids. Her once perfect manicure was gone, replaced by short, practical nails. Her designer clothes had been swapped for comfortable jeans and t-shirts that could handle the daily work. "Again, read it again," shouted a 4-year-old boy named Danny, bouncing with excitement. "One more time," Vanessa agreed with a smile, turning back to the first page. She'd learned that small kindnesses, like reading the same book 3 times in a row, meant everything to these children. When she first started her journal entries, they had been full of complaints. "The kitchen is too hot. My back hurts. Everything smells." Judge Washington had written brief comments in the margins, pushing her to look deeper, to see beyond her own discomfort. Week by week, her entries had changed. "Today, I met a woman who walks 3 miles to a job interview because she can't afford bus fare. Rose's son got an A on his math test. We celebrated with extra dessert I brought in. Tom taught me how to make his grandmother's soup recipe. He said I'm a natural. No one has ever said that about me before." Vanessa had been surprised to discover she had talents beyond shopping and taking selfies. She could organize the donation room efficiently. She was good with the younger children. She even had a knack for listening to the older residents' stories without judgment, something she'd never done before in her life. After finishing the story time, Vanessa headed to Mrs. Chen's office for her daily check-in. "Your journal this week shows real progress," Mrs. Chen said, looking over her reading glasses at Vanessa. Judge Washington mentioned it specifically. Vanessa felt a strange flush of pride. She couldn't remember the last time she'd earned praise for something real. "There's something I've been thinking about," Vanessa said hesitantly. "The shelter needs a better system for the donation room. Everything's disorganized, and people can't find what they need." Mrs. Chen raised an eyebrow. And I thought maybe I could help set up a better system. My father has connections with some department stores. They throw out last season's clothes all the time. If I could get those clothes donated here instead." Mrs. Chen leaned back in her chair, studying Vanessa with new interest. "That sounds like an excellent idea. Why don't you write up a proposal?" That night, Vanessa worked until midnight on her proposal, surprising herself with her own enthusiasm. The next day, she called her father for the first time in weeks. "Daddy, I need a favor, but not the kind you think," she said when he answered. The conversation lasted over an hour. At first, Robert Thompson had been confused by his daughter's request for business contacts rather than a way out of her punishment. By the end, though, his voice held something Vanessa hadn't heard before: genuine respect. On her final day of service, Vanessa stood nervously in front of Judge Washington's bench. The courtroom was the same, but she was different, changed in ways she was still discovering. "Ms. Thompson," Judge Washington began, "I've read all your journal entries and received reports from Mrs. Chen. It seems you've taken this experience seriously." "I have, Your Honor," Vanessa replied, her voice clear and steady. "More than I expected to." The judge nodded. "I'm pleased to hear that. Have you prepared a statement as requested?" Vanessa took a deep breath. She had practiced this moment, but now her carefully rehearsed words seemed inadequate. "When I first came to your courtroom, I thought I was above the rules," she began, her voice faltering slightly. "I thought my father's money could fix anything. I disrespected you, this court, and worst of all, I disrespected people I didn't even know, people who deserve better. She paused, gathering her thoughts. At Hope Harbor, I met a woman who lost her home after getting sick without health insurance. I met a veteran who can't find work. I met children who have never had their own beds, but who still share their toys with each other. Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them away, determined to finish. I'm not the same person who stood here 3 months ago. I'm ashamed of who I was then, but I'm grateful, truly grateful for the sentence you gave me. It opened my eyes to a world I never knew existed, a world where people face real problems with real courage. Judge Washington's expression softened. And what will you do with these insights, Ms. Thompson? I've started a program connecting department stores with shelters across the city. We've already secured regular clothing donations from 3 major retailers. Vanessa smiled shyly. And I've applied to volunteer at Hope Harbor permanently. Mrs. Chen says they can use my help with fundraising. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the courtroom. Judge Washington nodded slowly, a small smile appearing on his face. Ms. Thompson, when I sentenced you to community service, I hoped it would teach you something about responsibility and respect for others. It seems it has done that and more. He tapped his gavel lightly. I consider your sentence fulfilled. This case is closed. As Vanessa turned to leave, the judge added, Ms. Thompson. She paused, looking back. I look forward to hearing about what you do next. Vanessa smiled, not the practiced, camera-ready smile of her old social media posts, but something genuine and warm. Thank you, Your Honor, for everything. Outside the courthouse, Rose and her children waited with a small group from the shelter. When they saw Vanessa, they'd burst into applause. The local news reporter who'd been following the story of the trust fund girl's transformation caught the moment on camera. The headline the next day read, From Contempt to Compassion, How a Judge's Unconventional Sentence Changed a Life and a Community.